I'm Eric,
And I'm Todd.
Cool for the Comic Shop. And in this episode, we'll be talking about the illustrious Toy Story franchise, what many would consider to be the best animated franchise of movies of all time, perhaps.
I can't. Are there any? Is there any competition that you can think of even?
Um, for me personally, the How to Train Your Dragon movies are pretty high up there.
It's funny. I read that book when I was a kid, but I've never seen a single one of the movies. But I hear they're great.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And it's a trilogy now, so it's almost the same amount of movies. Um, but yeah, it's funny because they both had movies come out last year, so 2019 was actually pretty good for animated sequels.
Yeah, and I liked Frozen too. I know a lot of people did, and I like that one almost, if not as much as the first. I know that's a weird opinion.
Yeah, I don't love either really, but I've never been into the princess movies. But now we're on a tangent. We are here to talk about Woody, Buzz, and the gang, Todd.
Yes, they could all be princesses.
When
Oh,
the
sorry.
original Toy Story came out in 1995, I think it was probably one of relatively few Disney movies that didn't have either furries or princesses.
I think you're right, and this is probably very well known now, but the reason they went with was because they couldn't get they had the uncanny valley problem where they couldn't get convincing
Hmm.
humans, so somehow they came up with using toys instead.
Honestly, I think that's probably one of the most ingenious like design decisions in cinema history. Because if it would have been a movie about humans, I don't think people would have looked past that very much, and I don't think it'd be a classic that people still watch to this day.
No, definitely not. And then there's really it would be such a different movie. It's hard to gauge, but aesthetically now it's tough for me because I grew up with these movies. I have the nostalgia and the memories, and that's one thing I want to get into before really delving into any of the movies individually. But the first movie, when I watch it now, I do still enjoy it. It does still look great for its time, but there is that second half of that sentence. It looks great for its time.
For sure. I mean, they've definitely improved over the years, but you would not want it any other way. It looks even serviceable is good because I did watch the entire trilogy before Toy Story 4 came out last year. So I have a pretty recent viewing in my memory. And I remember thinking to myself, like, wow, it still looks pretty good. I mean, it's 1995, but I play a lot of video games too. So, I mean, it looks better than like PlayStation 2 or Xbox graphics, and that those video game consoles like a decade later. So, in that lens, I'm kind of satisfied.
Exactly. The only time I really remember the first Toy Story, the animation rev really being a distraction, would be when the human characters are on screen.
Yes.
And then the second one is actually much better in that way for the most part. The only exception being actually when the little wiener dog runs in at the beginning of the movie.
Exactly what you're talking about. That's a little bit of an uncanny animation, like when he's like helping Woody save Wheezy, I believe.
Yeah.
Um, Toy Story 2, I believe, was in 1999, which was only 4 years after the original. And the improvement that they made in 4 years is pretty astounding too, in my opinion.
For sure. I actually remember my timeline's real hazy because it was one of my earliest memories. But either Toy Story 2 or The Phantom Menace was the first film I ever saw in theaters. At
Yeah,
least that I remember seeing.
makes sense. I didn't see any of those in theaters because I think you're a little bit older than I am, so I was like 3 years old at the time. But The Phantom Menace and Toy Story 2, two movies where I was young enough to see them at home, but I also understood that they, had just came out, that they were brand new and were in movie theaters. So I do have vivid memories watching them when I was at a young age. Like Toy Story 2 especially was our jam as a family. Like my parents would watch that with me a lot. So that must tell me that my parents knew that these, animated movies, these Toy Story movies were a little bit better than your typical animated movie, and that's why they wanted to rewatch it as well.
Yeah, I remember. I think I don't remember this too well. My mom tells me about it. One of my top two favorite movies is Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and I just decided to buy the movie in high school, and I was watching, I think, with my sister, and my mom mentioned like, oh, you used to watch this like every single day when you were a kid for like a year. You just play it and then rewind it and play it again, and I don't really remember that too. I remember seeing the movie and remember liking the movie, but I'm almost positive I did that with the Toy Story movies, because I have a lot more memories associated with Toy Story than I do Willy Wonka.
It's kind of funny how that works, because me and my brother had like movies that I look back at that aren't that great that we would do the same thing and rewind and rewatch. Like, man, I can't even like fathom a world in which I would even do that for my favorite movies these days. But the child's mind is so much simpler.
Yeah, more than once a week would be taxing for 90% of movies for me.
For sure, for sure. Almost all movies, probably, because like I maybe watch a few movies a week, maybe. But yeah, that would be rough. But yeah, us kids, we don't even know what we're missing out on. We just, if we like something, we'll keep.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I have pictures of this. I was gonna ask my mom if she could find it, but I dressed up like Woody, like all the time, and I had a little Woody doll with the drawstring, and I was pretty obsessive with these movies.
It's awesome. I think one of my really, really early costumes for Halloween was Mr. Potato Head, actually. I think I remember my mom making it out of like different pieces of felt and all the face pieces and stuff. Like 4 or 5, honestly. So it was young.
That's pretty impressive. You don't see too many Mr. Potato Heads.
Yeah, I guess she just thought that would be a fun art project, and like happy to dress up as anything, So yeah, I have a vague early memory of that.
I like that. I think that's a good idea. It's a good thing. I think I was just thinking like it'd be a cool rule for Halloween as a family to say, you could be anything you want, but you have to make it.
That would be really cool, and I think Toy Story would be a really good franchise to lend itself to family costumes. Yeah, like several people could be different things. Like, I think Woody and Jesse would be like good adult costumes, and then all the smaller toys could be every kid.
So you want to get into the first movie?
Yeah, I'm thinking like a dad now. I need to see these Toy Story movies. They make me sentimental and make me feel weird. So yeah, we'll get into the first movie, and actually just instead of the animation quality, we'll just talk about like the story and the characters and everything else.
Yeah. So the most recent time, it's actually been a long time since I've seen a lot of these, which is kind of funny because I remember so much of them, and because I've seen them just so many times. But
yeah,
the most recent time I watched the first movie, I watched with my sister. I was in college still, probably sophomore or junior, and she had to watch something, and so we threw that on. And what really shocked me watching as an adult as opposed to watching as a child was Woody's the bad guy.
Yeah, I know. You don't really understand that when you're a kid, I don't think. Like, everybody's just like, they're toys, so it's like they're playing around. That's the kid's point of view. But yeah, when you watch it as an adult, you're like, oh my god, Woody is actually a straight up asshole. And then you like props to Pixar for being like, wow, you made an unlikable main character, at least for a while.
What might be more terrible is that I idolized this toy.
Yeah, I know, right? Well, maybe you idolized him from Toy Story 2 more, so I would give you a...
Yeah, it's so interesting because he's one of the most lovable characters ever, and yet the first movie he's in, for a majority of that movie, he is, I mean, he borderline resorts to murder out of pure jealousy.
You're absolutely right. Right. Whatever the equivalent of toy murder is, I guess is just murder for them. And it was certainly attempted murder. Every time I would watch it with my brother when we were like older than super young, I'd be like, "Yeah, Woody's about to murder Buzz now." And I think the first time Ryan was like grasped that idea, he was like, "Oh my God, you're right, dude." I'm like, "Yeah, I am." Bowling ball scene.
Yeah, it's absolutely nuts. And on that note, it's such a fun concept because you have so much going on that I think it's easy even for like us to take for granted just how ingenious the entire concept of Toy Story is. So you're starting with these toys, and what it immediately does is it gives you two things in different ways. You're looking at inanimate objects, your toys that you play with as a kid, as though they are sentient creatures and have real personalities and quirks and all that. So that's one flip in perspective. That's one hook. But there's a second one. The movie's from the toys' point of view, as opposed to something like Small Soldiers or something like that, The Indian in the Cupboard. So you're not only seeing the toys from a different perspective, you're seeing our world from the toys' perspective, which completely changes everything, like a dog or like getting locked in a shelf or whatever, or a toy box and having to get out.
Yeah, no, it's honestly done so well, to the point that when I was a kid, the Toy Story movies and the My Little Toaster movies actually convinced like 3-year-old me, like spiritually, that every single inanimate object was a living thing. Not even joking.
I wonder how many kids with like OCD that movies like that really just like damaged psychologically.
Well, yeah, maybe my point of view that stuck with me throughout childhood is a clear sign that I have OCD tendencies because like I would look at the table and I was like, man, every cell, the table itself, everything, it's just alive. And like I think, Toy Story probably made me have my first existential crisis.
That's good. That's probably what they intended to do with it. Speaking of
It probably was in a way.
Speaking of existentialism in Toy Story, I don't know if you knew this. I heard this past year, and it really shocked me because I never even considered it. The whole allegory with Andy and Woody's relationship is a representation for God and religion.
That could be an interesting parallel.
And
Is that like just for the story originally?
to my understanding, that was a huge part of John Lasseter's drive with the original film.
The kids growing up is like a person like growing away from their religion.
I think that's kind of what it is, and like, and I don't know this theory too well. I don't even know if you could call it a theory, because to my understanding, I mean, it is a theme intended to be in the movie.
Yeah.
I'm not as knowledgeable as a lot of people on the internet on this one, but so I think the whole thing's about like feeling like abandoned by God.
Toy's perspective, they're like abandoned by God because, maybe Andy is not an all-powerful God, so he like doesn't have the ability to like find Woody and Buzz when they're lost, for example.
Yeah, and that really, I don't know. I don't really necessarily prescribe to that look on the movie.
Yeah.
I've never seen them that way. I've seen them so many times in a certain light that I probably never will. But I found that very interesting, and it kind of like changed the way that I view each one of the movies after hearing it.
It's certainly an interesting school of thought to entertain. But like you said, like I wouldn't think about, completely that way. But yeah, is an idea that is pretty interesting. But what I find so impressive about the first movie and why it really holds up for all ages is really just a story about loving yourself and accepting others at the end of the day. But it's done in an actually interesting, real feeling way instead of the typical hokey Disney movie, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Well, I think that's where Joss Whedon comes into play with the script, and I really don't care for a lot of things he does or his brand, but like I think when he's in a writer's room like that, and that kind of edginess can come out, or that meta self-awareness can come out. I think it was really channeled well in the first Toy Story movie, and even stuff like having an anti-hero be the face of it. Or another huge thing I think about all the time is the just how brilliant it is to have the protagonist, or whatever you want to call him, is a cowboy, and he's jealous of the spaceman. As the kids look into like new toys, which of course the cowboy set in the old times, and the spaceman in modern times, the astronaut.
Yeah. No, there's so many just little implications and parallels with what every toy is, what they represent. And it's just the creativity is really in full force. I mean, when it came out, I would say it's arguably probably one of the most creative movies of the 1990s.
Definitely, and the 90s had a lot of competition, but I can't think of any.
Good for movies.
I can't think of many as transformative as Toy Story, at least in American cinema.
But yeah, I mean, it completely changed the landscape of animation. I mean, you look at its impact that it had on Disney animation and not just Pixar. Of course, Pixar would always stick to their 3D roots, but most Disney blockbusters, especially in the past decade, are 3D animation. And without Toy Story, I don't know if that would have happened.
That's true. The whole CGI trend in general with animated films really, I don't want to say Toy Story alone kicked it off, but I think it really showed that there's potential there and that you can use it well.
Yeah, I would say it was the biggest stick of dynamite. Like there were multiple, T2 would be a movie that helped influence that with its CGI. But yeah, I think it might be the biggest rocket, I guess, to propel that forward.
The one thing it's really funny, because I don't know if you have this, but I just think of the characters, like I don't think of Woody as, oh, this is Tom Hanks. I was like, oh, that's Woody's voice. The casting is so strange in the movies and yet so brilliant.
Yeah, I think that would come into play depending on when you first saw Toy Story. So I think because you and I saw Toy Story as small children, of course we think of it as Woody. We didn't know who Tom Hanks was when we were 4 years old. Later on you do. So I think like now I obviously recognize the voice, but since our first recognition of it is just of the character, I think that's why, because it's pretty obviously, Tom Hanks voicing the role.
Definitely. Like I'm looking at it right now, the cast. And of course you have Tom Hanks, then Tim Allen. But then for like Mr. Potato, you got Don Rickles, Jim Varney as Slinky Dog, Annie Potts as Bo Peep. Like it was the 90s, and that is a bit different, but that is a very stacked cast for an animated movie, and not just in the way where it's like, the top 2 or 3 big actors today, and then a pop star like you may see today in a movie like Trolls 2 or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, they got a swath of like supporting actors and comedians voicing roles. So it felt like they put effort into the casting and didn't just typecast some famous people and, throw in a couple of, one-note jokes, which I feel like a lot of anime movies do these days sometimes.
For sure, and it's weird to me. I'm pretty casual with children's entertainment. For the most part, I can enjoy it if it's for kids. But then I'm also very protective of family entertainment, because I think these are the morals that kids are going to be growing up with. So you almost have to be more critical in some ways.
There is actually a line between something like Toy Story and something like Secret Life of Pets, for example. Like Secret Life of Pets was like entertaining enough and maybe had a moral in there, but I would call that like children's entertainment. And then Toy Story, like you said, is family entertainment. And it's just kind of got this higher level where if even adults can appreciate the themes and the storylines, then it's just kind of in that higher echelon genre, I guess, in the way I see it, at least.
Yeah, and I don't it's funny you mentioned that because I wasn't even using those terms purposefully in that way, but it is true because like something like
Yeah,
Minions, I went and saw Minions when it came out. I didn't see the other Despicable Me movies, and like I watched, it's like, it's a kids movie. It's fine, I guess. I don't know. I'm an adult.
yeah, like it's jokey. Like, I mean, you as an adult are not going to ever have the desire to rewatch Minions. I saw it as well once, and it was times, but that's it, and you'll forget about it. I think kids movies, in general, have such a possibility to leave an impact if they actually are well made for all audiences. So if they do land, we're talking about them 25 years later, and probably will be another 25 years from now.
So one little detail in the first movie that it's just something that I appreciate so much and think so interesting is Andy having his name signed on the foot of each of his toys. I think that is such a great touch that they add the characters' connections to him as their owner.
Absolutely. I would argue it's one of the most enduring symbols of animated movies, honestly, because they use that throughout all four films to great emotional effect. Every time a character lifts their boot and there's a name there, you just instantly have like a pang of emotion.
Yeah, and it's that kind of thing where like, when I was a kid and I didn't quite understand storytelling or structure or anything, I didn't quite get how they could come up with that or where you get that from. And now I'm 26 years old with an English degree and I've written 10 books. And I'm like, I still don't know how you come up with something like that. I don't know how that runs through your mind. And you,
Yeah, I mean, I think they just came up with like the toys being alive concept, and then that's just such an innately brilliant concept, and it just breeds other really good ideas from there.
one thing aside from, Woody, and then you have him being jealous, and then you got the dynamic of him being jealous and Buzz just being naive, thinking he is an astronaut, space ranger. But you've also such a strong supporting cast of characters. It's really an ensemble piece.
Absolutely, it's an iconic cast of characters.
And you got Slink, Rex. I forget RC. I think RC is such an underrated little character in those movies, and they bring him back for the
Oh,
fourth in a
absolutely.
scene. That's great.
When the fourth movie started, and like that was the main like prologue, was trying to get him out of the rain. I was like, oh my god, save my boy, please.
Yeah, I never thought that we would see that character again, and it was definitely like a tense emotional moment to start that movie with.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we should probably move on to the second movie, but before we do that, I wanted to ask you what your favorite scene is from the first movie.
Oh, that's a good question. My favorite scene. You know what I think it is, and that is oh no, I definitely know what it is, and this is such an obvious one, but I'm sticking with it. When they got the moving van, and Buzz and Woody are trying to catch up, and they're flying, and then they get on RC, and Slink has to reach out to help them. That is just such a great climactic scene, and that's probably my favorite.
Yeah, well, it really tests the loyalties well because Slinky is trying to help, and then Mr. Potato Head is like, "No, screw that. This guy's a murderer." So they still don't help. It's very frustrating. I remember being very frustrated as a kid. I was like, "God damn, these toys just gotta listen."
Yeah, I felt the same way, and I remember that because I was gonna say that you've got a friend in me where you know Woody's getting really mad at Buzz. It's a bunch of comedic little moments, but I think that scene is just so tense, and that's probably the one that I'll remember the most.
Yeah, no, it's a very good one. So my favorite scene comes probably about 10, 15 minutes before that. I and this definitely wasn't my opinion as a kid, but as an adult rewatching the movies, this scene really hit me. So it's when Woody is trapped in a crate in Sid's room, and Buzz is like sitting on the counter with the rocket strapped to his back. And Buzz is just full on in depression mode because he realizes he's not a real space ranger and he's dealing with that disillusionment. And then Woody is just desperately trying to tell him how cool of a toy he is. And it's such a good character for Woody because Woody's not actually using Buzz for once. He actually, you can hear him trying to believe and tell Buzz that every toy has worth and why they have self-worth. It just really hits me as an adult.
Yeah, I kind of forgot about that scene. Like, I know you describing it, it came back to me. But that is a good one. But, like, I'm kind of biased. I kind of love every scene in the movie. I really.
Yeah, well, it's a tight movie. It's a tight runtime. It's about like 80 minutes or so. So it doesn't overstay its welcome. It's well paced. Like it's funny because I feel like I love the sequels more, but I really hesitate to find a flaw with the first movie.
Yeah, I think the first movie is the most perfect, but it's not my personal favorite.
Yeah, I know what you mean. There's a kind of a difference between best movie, favorite movie, and there's so many different factors, as I'm sure we will
I respect
talk
the
about as
first
we
the
head
most.
into. Yeah, oh, for sure. Well, I mean, started really is carried out through all of the sequels. So absolutely all the respect is due there. But yeah, you want to head into Toy Story 2 now?
For sure. So, speaking of which, for me, Toy Story 2 is my personal favorite.
I still waffle back and forth to this day. But back when, because for a long while there was only two Toy Story movies. So as a kid, two was also my favorite. I did like two more than the original. And I think a lot of the reasons I like two more than the original, and still might be some of the reasons as an adult, they really flesh out the world more. The added characters are awesome. I mean, the characters they add in Toy Story 2 are still main characters in 3 and 4. They really add so many essential building blocks to the Toy Story franchise in 2. And if 2 was not good, there wouldn't be a 3 10 years later and a 4 another decade later.
And not just that, there probably wouldn't have been Pixar. Because I believe between Toy Story and Toy Story 2 was A Bug's Life, which I actually loved as a kid. Flick was another
I like
character
A
I was
Bug's Life.
obsessed with. It's Seven Samurai with insects.
Yeah, no, A Bug's Life is good, and it's a movie I actually need to rewatch because it's been a long time. But yeah, there's something about A Bug's Life that is not as well remembered or strong as Toy Story. So did you hear the story? This is a true story. Toy Story 2 almost got completely erased when it was nearly finished.
I did hear that. Just once again, just this year actually, right when the fourth came out, a friend told me about that. I'd never heard that before.
Yeah, so apparently, Pixar, their like studio was all operating on the same kind of like computer mainframe or whatever. I'm not a tech guy, so I'm probably butchering the actual details. But the point is, in their studio, they like lost the movie. It like glitched out, and they accidentally deleted it. But one of the animators was pregnant at the time and was working on her parts of the movie from home. And she had actually, in order to work from home, she had actually backed up the entire movie to her computer at her own home. And then when the real movie got deleted, they just took her backup of the movie and put it in the studio again. So thank God.
That's pretty nuts. The story I heard was that it was like halfway completed, and then they lost it and just had to restart. So that's actually kind of a better story than what I heard.
Yeah, I think it was a YouTube video that I watched about it maybe couple of years ago, but I don't remember the YouTube channel. But yeah, I ended up like doing some research after the YouTube video, and it sounds like it was true. I mean, at least according to the sources that I looked up. But yeah, it might have been halfway finished. It was definitely a lot of progress, and if they had to have restarted, it would have made delay. But it still came out in 1999, so I don't think it got delayed because of that backup that they had.
Like you said earlier, the thing with Toy Story 2 for me, and what really puts it above the first, is I will say the second Toy Story movie, it's almost a little more like a DreamWorks movie in some ways. It's got so many pop culture references. It's kind of the sellout movie.
Yeah. Is, but I think it works because it actually uses its consumerism as a theme, as and not just a method for gags. But it does both, and it does both pretty well, I think.
Exactly, but the thing is that it really pushes it for me above, other than I just genuinely enjoy the story more, is that I cannot imagine Toy Story without Jessie, without Bullseye. I think like Al's
baby.
Toy Barn, just like you said, the world building, it just adds so much into it that to me it's in some ways just as original as the first movie in terms of what it does with that world.
Yeah, and they definitely try to make this movie more epic, because I remember being a kid and watching the scenes like the opening with before you know it's a video game with Buzz. It looks like he's just tearing ass through a planet of Zurg's robots, and honestly, it felt like Star Wars. It felt like animated Star Wars before we like actually had animated Star Wars for a few minutes.
It did, and then you get that scene, the yard sale scene, which is once again just such a tense opening to a movie.
Yeah, it is. I mean, this movie the pacing in the Toy Story movies is generally good, but I think the first two movies do it the best. Like in like 10 minutes, after the Buzz Lightyear opening, you have like Woody getting his arm ripped, and then he's like falling into the void and getting like drowned by dead toys. It's like horrifying as a kid.
Yeah, it's interesting we talk about the mature themes of the sequels, but yet the first two movies had that, but it wasn't emphasized as much. They were just very dark, strange, kind of philosophical movies.
Yeah, I think it was more like the moments could be dark, and I feel like makes sense because Andy is still a kid at that point in time, so the crises that the toys had were not quite as disillusioning and lonely as they are in 3 and 4. But yeah, the moments of darkness are still there. It's like they're echoing things that are to come.
Yeah, it's just very urgent and immediate in the first two movies, and that is one thing I love is Stinky Pete and Woody learning about his past, and the old Woody cartoon I think is really great. It's a good aesthetic how they show the cartoon and stuff, and it feels real.
No, I totally love that. I remember re-listening to the Woody's Roundup song in the credits of the VHS like over and over and over again. Like, yeah, I was pretty obsessed with this movie too.
And then of course you have Jessie's backstory, which I think might be at that point in the series maybe the best moment in the entire series at that point in it.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I definitely, even as a kid, older I've gotten, the more sentimental and weepy I get during movies because I'm a little boy. But even as a kid, I was pretty sad during Jessie's backstory scene. So they did something right.
Yeah, and they balance it really well. Like, it's interesting how it kind of set the standard for the rest of the series, where it became a jailbreak structure after the second movie, where Woody is kidnapped by Al, who's going to restore him because Woody's some old kind of antique-ish toy that's worth money, and the other toys have to break him out. So on one hand, you have Woody with this weird existential kind of deal where he's interacting with these toys who are abandoned and who just like live to sit on a shelf, and he's questioning his future, he's questioning Andy growing up, his past, his place in the world. And then on the other hand, you have this like gag a minute heist narrative essentially with the other toys.
It really balances each other well, and I really like when a movie can have like two plots going at the same time, but they complement each other and they're doing different things. So like when the Woody Jesse plot is getting a little too intense, then we cut to Buzz and the others just being doofuses, and it really helps release the tension. It lets you breathe for a couple minutes, then get emotional for a couple minutes, and it keeps going back and forth for like the whole middle act of the movie.
Yeah, and the weird thing is that I always usually hate when you have a movie and it's based around two characters' friendships, which really Buzz and Woody's friendship was the backbone of these movies for quite a while. So like you get a sequel, you immediately split them up. And it's like, well, I want to see the dynamic. I want to see these characters play off each other. I can't think of another great example of the characters being split up other than Toy Story 2.
Yeah, they do it. I would say they do it from The Force Awakens to The Last Jedi, actually, in the sequel trilogy for Star Wars. But yeah, other than that, I can't think of another example off the top of my head.
Because like, and I think what makes it work, whereas other ones, when it will happen, it's usually kind of frustrating, is the new characters in this movie are just so good that they feel like they've always been a part of the series.
Exactly, and honestly, I don't know what Woody and Buzz would have done together for an entire movie. I mean, they really challenged themselves with making a plot in which they were separated, because I feel like it could have been an easier decision to have them be together.
Yeah, they easily could have
I think
done
it still
like...
works.
Sorry.
Works because Buzz's whole mission is to save Woody. Like Woody ended up trying, saving him in the end of the first movie. So it feels earned, even if they are separated most of the time.
Oh, you made a good point. I forgot that eventually Woody has to... I mean, I remember, but I forgot the structuralism of Woody having to save Buzz. So I guess even from the first movie, it's always been kind of like, oh, we got to bust our friend out of here kind of story structure.
I was just going to say that when you said that too, because actually all four movies are about, villains kidnapping other characters and then breaking those characters out. Every single movie. So if you want to like gripe about anything Toy Story related, maybe it's the trope of your friends getting kidnapped is in all four films.
Definitely. I didn't feel that fatigue until the third. With the second, I think it's done so differently that you don't even notice.
Yeah, no, I mean, honestly, I didn't even really think of it consciously until like you mentioned it 5 minutes ago. And then I was like, oh my God, that is what it all boils down to. If like we're talking about the base conflict.
Yeah, that it is really funny, but it works for the series, and I think especially with as much else as they have going on, the basic skeletal structure of the plot, I don't want to say it's not relevant, but it's almost window dressing for the jokes, for the emotional moments, for the character growth.
No, absolutely. I mean, what good is a plot that doesn't service those things anyway? So, I mean, it does it very well. Do overuse the concept of a villain, kidnapping one of the toys or all the toys, like in 3, kind of, for example. It still is done differently, like you said. I mean, the first, and I think it's because the villains are so different in each of the movies. Because a lot of people don't really talk about the Toy Story villains, but there are clear, defined villains in every movie. In the first movie, you have an abusive kid who doesn't know how to treat his toys with respect, or probably anything, or anybody with respect. And then Stinky Pete's, even though he's not like a shining star of a... I mean, his motives make sense, and he wants that legacy that Woody is like grappling with. Like you said, he's questioning between, should I have my legacy with my friends as like people should all kids should remember us as toys, or should this one kid that I love, still have me as his toy? And it's compelling dilemma for Woody, and it's a compelling motive for the Stinky Pete.
And another thing I love about the Stinky Pete character is, as I recall, he's kind of burnt just like Jesse is, because they've all been abandoned in some way, and it's showing it's an externalization of Woody's inner struggle between being hopeful despite the inevitable passing of time, or just becoming cynical.
Absolutely. And then, Jesse gets the happy ending out of that, and then Stinky Pete gets to play with Barbie dolls, which maybe that's a happy ending too.
Yeah, I think actually Stinky Pete made out on that one.
I think of all the villains, I think Stinky Pete might be all right still.
Um, so
Is Sid like dealing drugs in like the time of Toy Story 3 and 4 when Andy's in college?
uh, so the second one too, I think once again the climax is so strong. It's kind of a repeat of the first, but instead of RV, you get Bullseye, where they're riding on Bullseye to go on the plane, but it works just
Yeah.
as well, I think.
Oh, absolutely. And that goes back to my point of this movie is just more epic in scope. Like, instead of a moving van, we are literally following an airplane that is about to take off. Like, you feel the speed because this is one of my favorite scenes where the size of the toys is put on display. Like, they're just so tiny compared to the baggage cars, to the luggage itself, and the airplane. Like, the tire of the landing gear is like way bigger than Woody and Jesse, and they're like about to be crushed by it at the very end.
That's the thing. This movie just uses, I think, in general, the direction of this film's much better than the first, which I'll say is probably a matter of the passing of time and confidence of them knowing
Yeah.
how to use these characters. But the scale, just constantly. You think about like Buzz and the gang under the traffic cones, truck crossing the street. You got the airplane thing. You got Woody trying to sneak over to Al when he's asleep. He has all these Cheetos on the ground. He's trying not to step on any, and then Bullseye does. There's just constant reminders that these are toys, and that even though it's a world we know, it's such a foreign perspective on it. It feels like a fantasy.
Absolutely. And you naming all of these gags like really brings back my memory, and I think I would say that Toy Story 2 is the funniest of the four movies.
Definitely, it's definitely the one that tries to be the funniest. That one is. It's almost like they knew, even though the third one wasn't anywhere close to being out by the time they released this. It feels like the second film in a trilogy, very much so.
Yeah, no, absolutely. They really made a good middle chapter, and I guess that's a good segue into talking about Toy Story 3.
Yeah. So speaking of the structure of the series and how I began to get kind of fatigued with it, the thing is with the third is it's almost whiplash for me, where I think that it's bookended by two of the best scenes in the entire series, and everything else in it is pretty good. I like the whole movie,
Yeah.
but like those first like 15 and last 15 minutes are like 20 out of 10.
I totally agree with you, and I think for a long time that's why I thought 3 was my favorite, because you and I both, you were probably in early high school when Toy Story 3 came out.
Yes, I think I was in the 10th grade because I went and saw it with my first
Yeah.
girlfriend. And I remember, this is kind of funny because we went with my family and my sister was very young and she had to go to the bathroom or something. So my mom took her out, and then my girlfriend, she just wanted to like make out in the theater, and I was like mad at her. I was like, Woody's on the screen. What are you doing? Stop kissing me.
She did not have her priorities in line.
No, so that didn't work out.
That's a really funny memory though. So charming. But back to my point. My point was, you were in 10th grade. I was in 8th grade going into 9th grade. I believe it was a summer movie, if I recall. So anyway, we were growing up. We were teenagers, right? And the brilliance of Toy Story 3 is they did have the patience to wait 11 years. And since that wasn't such a long wait, it really felt like we were growing up with Andy. It really felt like, oh my God, we're becoming adults. And I think that's why the beginning 15 minutes and the ending 15 minutes hit so hard. Like, I remember first time I watched that movie, I cried in the theater because I just apparently I had a lot of these emotions inside me about growing up, and like actually made probably tons of kids face those emotions if they grew up with these movies.
Yeah, and I was a little bit closer to graduation, all that, than you were. So those thoughts like were starting to bleed into my mind, but they were still a little bit far away. Enough.
Yeah.
If I was a senior when this movie came out, it probably would have been twice as effective upon that first viewing. But one thing I think about all the time is if this was Toy Story 10, we wouldn't care.
Definitely not.
But with that said, because they waited that passage of time, that brilliant montage after the really fun fantasy sequence, it's a fantasy action sequence that begins the movie with Andy playing as a kid. And you see that, and then you see the home video.
That's so good.
I'm actually getting a little choked up thinking about it.
Toy Story 3 is a rough movie to watch. I feel like I have never watched Toy Story 3 without crying at the end when Andy is playing with Bonnie. I think that is a scene that is humanly impossible for me to not cry during.
Yeah, I remember, especially around that time, like 10th grade, 11th grade, when there's a lot of confusion, a lot of conflicting emotions you don't quite understand or know how to navigate, and you just want that, like, catharsis of crying or something. I would be like, you're just down, you just don't really know why, you're just a teenager. I would just, like, put that scene on, and it just, like, okay.
Yeah, like, if you are in need for a good cry and have it in a while, just pop Toy Story 3 on Disney Plus really quick and just go to the end of the movie and just cry. So, I mean, it's probably as an effective way of doing it than anything.
Yeah, and I don't know why that opening where it shows Andy grow up, something about the way that's done is just so immaculate and just so impactful. I talked about it in our BoJack discussion from about 2 weeks ago now, but it's something about just seeing Andy grow up and become a teenager, and also his character model is like very good too. It's like when you see it, you're like, oh, that's Andy. It just, you don't even question, like, oh yeah, of course that's Andy now. But it's just such an impactful, great way to introduce the movie and show the passing of time.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, and we could talk for days about the beginning and ending of the movie, and I think, like you said, they really elevate it, an A- movie to an A+ movie, at least in our minds. Like, but to try to be objective, like, I understand probably what you were going to say next is like there are points in the middle of the movie that feel like they drag. That, I mean, there's certain scenes like, Ken and Barbie, pretty much everything they do is pretty much just for jokes. Like, there's no like plot behind those characters. For Buzz and the gang in Toy Story 2, it's like, yeah, they're doing a bunch of hijinks, but they're trying to save Woody. And it's like, it feels like there's more urgency. And then, the kids like destroying the toys in the playroom. And there's just a lot of scenes that, I don't know. It's still a good movie, but there are a lot of scenes that are still just not as strong.
Yeah, and in the playroom scene, like, that's really fun and exciting. And I don't know, it's just about midway through the movie. It's just not, I don't know how to put it without even just sounding like very superficial or shallow. I just remember watching and be like, this just isn't as good as the first two.
Yeah, I know what you mean. One of the only things that I would change in these movies that I think would be an improvement, I really hate when they capture Buzz in the middle of the movie and then they turn him into a Spanish Buzz, and that is not ever used for like the plot or drama. It's just meant to be a joke. So Buzz is effectively torn out of the movie for like 30 minutes because he's stuck in Spanish mode. And it's not even like he's really trying to communicate, because he's also kind of like brainwashed in Spanish mode because he thinks he's a space ranger again. So he's doesn't even feel like the same character. So they rip one of your two main characters out of the movie for really, like kind of like a rising act. And I feel like that is a bad decision.
Yeah, I agree with that definitely because the third movie in general has a very weird tone, just like the first two, I guess. But you got the Spanish Buzz thing. I remember there's a weird thing with Mr. Potato Head where he has the body of like a, a tortilla at one point or something like that.
Yeah, see stuff like that feels like it's trying to be funny and like falling a little flat. Whereas Toy Story 2 is trying to be funny, but I still feel like the jokes land more often.
Yeah, and there are a lot of good jokes in Toy Story 3. Some you just kind of like, chuckle at, some that are like laugh out loud funny. But then there's some stuff like that where it's just like, huh, that's an interesting decision creatively.
Jokes like that feel like they are aimed more at the new kids. Because it's still for kids, it's not for all the adults, but the early movies were still for kids too, and the overall I feel like the jokes, some of them were just a little more of that kind of like base level humor. But like you said, there's some jokes that are laugh out loud hilarious. Like clothes is really funny to me still. The crazy ass monkey with the symbols is scary and kind of funny. Like there's some weird ass moments that still make me chuckle.
Yeah, there really are. And then of course you have moments like the beginning when the soldiers leave, and one of the characters mentions to Woody, they're listing all the characters that left, and one says Bo Peep, and Woody just says Bo. It just has this look like it's such a subtle moment in a kid's cartoon.
But yeah, like there's definitely like the punch you in the face moments when they're all about to be incinerated, but there's also the subtle moments that are just as somber. They just pass, more quickly.
And yeah, with leading in the incinerator moment, usually I really do not care for I'm sure that there's a better term for it. I usually call it either the heroic sacrifice or the heroic death fake out in a movie. And it's like every Marvel movie has to have this, where the character has to die. We need to fit the Joseph Campbell hero's journey to a T, and they have to actually be in mortal danger. You think they're dead, and then at the last minute, oh my god, they're okay. But this movie does it so well because they drag it out so excruciatingly long.
Yeah, no, I remember being in the theater for the first time. Like, my rational mind should have said, of course they're not going to kill the freaking toys in a kid's movie. Like, no way. But in the moment, I was like, oh my God, they're dead. Like, I could not fathom a way that they would get out
That's
of their situation.
And then like once they like reach their hands out and all hold hands, you're just like, oh well, I guess they're done.
It's screwed up, man. Like Pixar needs to calm the fuck down.
Yeah. I think Up was the next year. Is the funny thing, but then
Up
what
was
they
the year
do?
prior, actually. So 2009,
Oh, wow.
2010 was rough. They were trying to make us cry a lot in those couple of years.
There's some stuff going on at the Pixar offices those years.
Yeah, there was some existential shit. Like, oh my god, yeah, and Up's my favorite animated movie of all time. So yeah, Pixar was in a really good time period with their movies. At
Oh,
the turn
definitely.
of
They were
that
on
decade.
fire. But
Yeah, they were, and Wally was really good too. So I mean, damn.
I really like Up. I've only seen it once, but I really enjoyed it. Of course, I like Toy Story. I remember liking Wally. I watched it. I really respected it. I don't remember a dang thing about the movie other than what it is.
I need to rewatch it. I need that's a movie I need to rewatch. You need to rewatch Up. Oh my god, because you probably remember the beginning and middle parts of that movie, but Up deserves your full attention and rewatch.
Yeah, yeah. I've always wanted to because I like the movie. I remember it pretty clearly, actually, but it's been. I mean, I was like a senior in high school, so it's been a minute.
On a tangent again,
Yeah.
but I'm surprised it took us like another 50 minutes to get on a tangent about another animated movie.
So to get back on track, I will say a big excuse that I give for this heroic fake out is the resolution to it is so clever with the claw returning with the aliens.
It is, and it's like it's a relief. It's a breath of fresh air in multiple ways. Like on the one hand, you're relieved that they're alive, but on the second hand, you're also relieved that there's humor again because how they get saved is funny. I mean, the fact that those aliens found a freaking, you know, actual claw and did that is very funny. So it's kind of like a double sigh of relief when it happens.
And not just that, but you think the aliens are dead. That's how it's so immaculately conceived. Where you see the
That's
aliens
true.
get like hit away, and you're like, "Oh my god, the aliens just died." Like the toys might be lost. And at the end, I thought like, okay, so Woody and Buzz are gonna live, but like Rex might get burn up. We don't know because they killed the
Oh
aliens,
my
so they're
god,
willing to.
talking about it. Yeah. What do you think about Lotso Huggenbear as the villain?
To me, it felt a little bit samey with Stinky Pete, to be honest, where he's like the kind leader, and then he's actually evil. But I liked once again, even his backstory felt kind of like it was Jesse's backstory, but just a little bit darker. But he was fine. I
Yeah.
liked him.
So it's like if Jesse if she got replaced with another Jesse instead of makeup, it's kind of like that's the story this time.
Yeah. Um.
Um, brings it in full force though is I don't know the actor's name, but whoever his voice actor is really good. And like when Lotso gets like angry and sad when they're like yelling at the toys over the dumpster, like they're yelling at the giant baby, and it's like she doesn't love you anymore, and you're nothing but trash, and it's just like, oh my god, stop attacking me. I really feel emotions when that happens.
That's fun. It is a great voice actor thing, and also the character design is so great. Those little hairs on his body, it's almost like they took Sully from Monsters Inc. and how great that looked, and they just were like, okay, we're gonna use modern technology for a villain now, and it's a teddy bear, and that's a great addition to the Toy Story universe.
It is. And I like that he's also kind of like a popular
Mhm.
stuffed animal bear. So it's like you could foreseeably see him in, great number on like store shelves. It's almost like he's a cross between like a Care Bear and like a Build a Bear. It's just he does feel like he could be marketed as a product, which of course they do in real life.
That is the funny thing is that they make these movies just they don't make them just for this, but a big incentive is they get to make toys out of the toys.
Well, for sure. Hey, that's also genius in a way. So
Yeah, I can't believe we didn't think about that earlier.
yeah. Well, I guess that we've pretty much talked about Toy Story 3 to its fullest. I guess before we get into 4, do you want to talk a bit about the music of the series just in general? Because, Randy Newman's there throughout all the movies too and kind of is like a connective tissue.
That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say much about it. I mean, it's like if somebody asks you to say like, "Hey, describe Hey Jude."
it's it always makes me feel cozy and like I'm a kid again, I guess. Like his songs in these movies are so intricately the fabric of the identity of Toy Story. It's kind of weird. Like other than a couple John Williams scores and maybe a couple other scores in movies, like I don't know many other movie franchises that have the music in their identity this much.
Yeah, I think about just the piano chords when they use those in certain scenes, and it's just immediate like a hot flash. I could tell like I'm getting all emotional and stuff. And then you got the song "You've Got a Friend in Me," which is used comedically, it's used emotionally. They really put it the full distance. It's almost like Lore's theme in Twin Peaks, where it's every scene and just all these different contexts they play it, and it always fits and always works exactly how it's supposed to. It's incredibly dynamic.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy how they're able to pull that off. And then he actually had a new song in Toy Story 4, which is far less memorable. But the fact that they even, had him do a new song for Toy Story 4 in 2019, I thought was kind of cute.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I remember this song being there and recognizing it as a new song, but I don't remember anything else about it.
I can't let you throw yourself away. It's actually a pretty funny montage when Forky is just trying to throw himself in the garbage for like 3 minutes straight.
Oh, that's it. Yeah.
But
Well,
yeah, so I think we've pretty much agreed on the Toy Story movies for the trilogy. So I think we might have some differing opinions in talking about Toy Story 4. So I guess we will do that now.
yeah. So the first thing I'm going to say, and this would probably be a good segue into this, is I think Toy Story had one of the best endings to a series of all time, if not the best. It's really a tall order to follow up, and even really you'd have to excuse making another movie in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean. And before I saw Toy Story 4, I was completely in that camp. I was like, why are they making another one? The ending in 3 is perfect. I mean, it's a perfect encapsulation of what Toy Story means as a franchise, of Andy's story, of Woody and Buzz's story. The beautiful playtime scene with Andy and Bonnie is impeccable. And like I said, it's one of the most guaranteed scenes to make you cry in cinema, probably. Um, but yeah, and then I actually saw Toy Story 4 last summer with my family, and I walked out of the theater and I loved it, honestly.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have strong feelings on it, if that makes sense, because I think it very easily could have been a cash grab, just just a typical comedy kids movie kind of deal. And honestly, with these characters, when I watch a movie with Woody and Rex and all them just hanging out, making jokes, sure. But I have a lot of respect for the fact that I think that they put a lot of effort into it in terms of A, the animation, and B, the storytelling. I think they really try to give as much care and attention as they possibly could. Ultimately, for me, it's got an Achilles heel, and that is it. It's just a bad idea. And I don't just mean making one in general, but even where they take the story, what they do with it. For me, almost every turn that they decide to do was not just an idea I disagree with. For instance, right now I'm rewatching this show 6 Feet Under, and I won't give it away. The third season, which is by far the worst, um, has a twist halfway through where they really change up the plot and it gets a lot darker. And the first time I saw the show, I did not like that idea at all, and it just didn't work for me. And watching it this time, I'm thinking like, I don't like this idea in theory, but the execution is so great and so incredibly well done that I'm cool with it. I would not have had faith on paper, but watching it on the screen, I'm sold. And I was never sold watching Toy Story 4.
Okay, so you don't like the idea of like Forky, Bo Peep coming back, things like that?
Yeah, both those. Forky is interesting. I think the idea is interesting. What it proposes for the mythology, if you will, of the series. But I don't think the character much goes anywhere. I don't think the joke's much further than it's initially introduced as.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I feel like story movies, Woody is always a protagonist, but there are multiple character arcs. Buzz has a character arc. Jesse has a character arc. The villains, have character arcs, and sometimes they stand alone. And more so than any of the other movies, I think Toy Story 4 is a movie that completely relies on Woody's character arc. I mean, if you look at Forky and villain, but you know who I'm talking about, the baby doll,
Oh yeah,
voice box. I can't remember her character's name. But anyway, um, and then Bo Peep, even all three of those characters are completely in service of Woody's character arc. So I think it's easy to not really buy into those other tertiary characters because they're all kind of meant to represent something that Woody's going through. But unlike Toy Story 2, for example, where Jesse and Stinky Pete represent something that Woody's going through, Jessie also had her own very strong character arc, and I can't really say that for Forky because he's almost always used for jokes, you know?
Yeah, it's the thing where like, so I'll break it down by the act. Like by the first act, he's introduced. He wants to be trash. He's kind of silly, but like it's such an interesting concept. The joke's funny of Bonnie preferring her this weird toy she just made to all these nice toys that she has, and that is realistic for a kid like us, the audience. Are like, you were given these toys by Andy. What are you doing? But as a kid, that does make sense, and that is clever and funny. By the second act, when he jumps out the window and creates the conflict, it's getting there, and he's walking and talking with Woody, and it's kind of okay. But by the end of it, he's just kind of irritating, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, really, after he talks with Woody and they walk the rest of the way to the RV park, Forky's Orc, the Spork's goddamn character arc is pretty much over at that point.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't want to throw himself away anymore, hanging out the rest of the movie. So they immediately have to introduce Bo Peep so that there's a new tertiary character who has an arc. Learns in the movie is be more loyal to your friends, even though I don't really think that's a lesson she necessarily needed to learn. So it's really all Woody. But Woody is a beloved character of yours. So how do you think they handle like Woody's emotions and his progression in Toy Story 4 at least?
See, and that is the thing to me where I just don't think it works. And I think that they know that. I think the writers cared and put a lot of time and energy into doing the unthinkable where Woody abandons his kid. I think that's even the last line of the movie is like, Woody's a lost toy now. And I think they try so hard to convince you of how it's going to happen and how it's possible. And by the end, I felt like it happened because the plot needed it to, not because it was organic. And a big thing with that for me is just so first of all, I mean, we know Woody. We've seen him through these 3 past movies. The Lost Toy in general thing, I find kind of strange that it's not putting it too much question with Bo Peep herself. The whole thing to me, and this is going to sound weird. You might think I'm crazy, but I'll throw this out there. The whole thing to me seems like a film about polygamy.
No, I kind of understand what you're saying there. Because if you're a lost toy, you have more freedom, but like Woody is kind of drawn toward the freedom, but also his new kid. Is that kind of where you're going?
Yeah, where it's almost like Woody's a monogamist and Bo Peep's a polygamist. And I'm not
kind of a good comparison, honestly.
Yeah, I'm not saying that's the straight there moral of it.
Yeah, but I know what you mean.
Don't know of what other theme it could be off the top of my head. Maybe I'm fixated on that. But it's a very strange thing, especially in a kid's movie, that I could not get past.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, but this also might help explain why I think the movie, at least for Woody's arc, is actually brilliant. The Toy Story trilogy ending Andy's story. Andy's literally just gone. But one of my favorite parts of Toy Story 4 is actually, ironically, when they're doing kind of the opening credits and like Woody is like playing in his backyard with Andy and stuff. That is so beautiful. That really hits you. Tangent aside, Andy's story ends at Toy Story 3. So the trilogy is still solid. It's still secure. Nothing's like retconned or changed. Sense that Woody's story with Andy is not over. Like through multiple points in the movie, Woody is still feeling this clinginess to Andy that the other toys are not showing, because Woody was like Andy's dad in some ways. And I feel like Andy doesn't have a dad in these movies either. It's kind of like a purposeful nod to show that there are other things that can help raise you other than just like your parents, especially if you only have one. So Woody still totally feels that. And one of my favorite parts in the movie is when they break out of the antique store and all the other toys are banged up and they're like, we are not going back in there. And then Woody is like, I have to go back in there. You know, it's the only thing I have left to do. And you just feel, and I feel like the acting is always, as usual, you know, what am I trying to say? Really good. And I don't know. You feel like Woody is doing everything that he's doing because of the shadow of Andy that is still cast over his heart. I mean, he had to say goodbye to the thing he loved most in the entire world. And I feel that throughout the entirety of Toy Story 4. And it drives every single action movie. And I think that's why this movie works for me.
And I get that. And I do agree that that is there. And I think that's handled well. It's not a thing for me. I'm not like, I hate Toy Story 4. It's the worst thing I've ever seen. There's a lot about that I do appreciate. And like you said, the acting's very good. The animation, of course, is top notch. I think the opening scene is, like I said, the first like 10, 15 minutes are pretty good. I like the flashback with the RV. The initial introduction to Sporky as a character I was dubious of from the introduction. I was on board with at that point in the film. A big thing for me is the comedy relief and all that. I only remember laughing maybe once the whole movie. The comedy really didn't do it for me in this one at all either.
Yeah, it's definitely going for a different style of comedy. On the one hand, you have the sheer ignorance of Forky, and then you have like the over the top Key and Peele moments, and then you have the normal Toy Story jokes, but then you also have the dumb dad jokes. And I feel like the comedy is not as consistent as it was in the past movies. It's the jokes are kind of all over the place.
Yeah, I feel like that. The one thing I'll say, and this is one thing that fans take a huge issue with, which I kind of disagree with, is they say that Buzz is just totally made into a complete moron in this one. He's kind of flanderized with, and I kind of see what they mean, but Buzz wasn't always the smartest guy to begin with.
Yeah, I feel like people have rosy retrospection for what Buzz was in the early movies. I mean, literally in the first movie, he thought he was a space ranger still.
Exactly.
In the third movie, he gets turned into Spanish Buzz. I mean, like, he gets caught a lot. Like, he has a good heart, but I feel like we all know that Woody's the brains. So,
but the
mind
gag
controlled
with,
into following his buttons, he's just thinks it's a good idea all of a sudden.
yeah, and I think that's clever. Like, listen to your inner voice, and then he has the buttons to toy. I thought that was a really nice touch. I didn't mind that at all. It might have been overdone a bit, but in concept, I thought that was one of the best points of the movie.
I agree. Buzz definitely isn't used a whole lot in the movie, so I feel like that's a better gripe than they slander Buzz as a character, because I don't feel like he's super stupid or anything. But if you take the amount of time he's in the movie, he might only be in the movie for like 20 minutes tops.
Yeah, I think you're right. And what's sad is
Not even that.
that's really all you get of any of those side characters too. He's in it the most, but then like Jesse's hardly in it at all. Mr. Potato Head's hardly in it at all. That was really disappointing for me personally.
Yeah, they're all stuck in the RV, and yeah, I totally agree. If I have one disappointment with the movie, it's that the Toy Story cast that we, grew up to know and love, yeah, they're not really here.
Now, I will say hypothetically, let's say they have plans to make another movie in 2 or 3 years, which actually they should probably get on it if they plan on doing that, because wait, what the heck? So if they're moving in real time, so Andy graduated high school when we were 10th grade, 8.5 grade. So let's see, how long ago? That was 2009, 2010. So it's been 10 years and Bonnie's still the same age.
Yeah.
That
I
kind
don't
of
think
sucks.
they're moving in real time anymore. I think I think 1, 2, and 3 may have been real time, but 4, I'm pretty sure is confirmed to be like a few months after 3.
That's fine. Like that doesn't totally bother me, but that does kind of suck.
They definitely abandoned that because it's been another decade.
Yeah, I don't know why it just now hit me like, hey, hold on, that girl, she would be driving the RV at this point.
Like she was 5, was actually 15 for a brief second.
Yeah.
Yeah, they definitely didn't do that anymore.
That's funny. Like I was gonna say, like if they just did something where, let's say, we get 3 Bonnie movies, and the next one is not gonna have Woody. It's gonna have all the other toys, and it focuses all on them. And so they wanted to give one last movie that focused exclusively on Woody. I mean, that is logical.
Yeah, they could. So yeah, that's the thing. I really, if they are gonna make it Toy Story 5, to make it, because you have made the bold decision to separate Woody from the rest of the group, like permanently. And obviously, they could always retcon things, but then that would just make the ending of Toy Story 4 feel stupid. Um, so yeah, I don't know what you do. Like you said, have a Woody solo movie, and then the rest of the toys in another movie. I don't feel like that would feel. I don't know. That would be weird.
Yeah, the whole thing. It all, whereas I thought Toy Story had a perfect ending, this is just like kind of an odd one.
Yeah. I thought the ending was good, if only because Woody was holding on to Bonnie because it was a surrogate Andy for him. Of course, he loves Bonnie, but not in the same way, really. And then when you think about it, like Bonnie was like throwing Woody in the closet. It's a cowboy doll. Like it just doesn't jive with her for some reason. Because she's a kid and it's whatever. Giving the sheriff badge to Jesse. It's like, if Bonnie truly, maybe a couple years later, Bonnie would have just put Woody in the closet or something for good. I mean, it feels like it makes sense, and more because Woody is getting rid of that emotional weight, that emotional tie to Andy, and he's trying to rekindle an old relationship that will hopefully be positive. So I still think it's a good ending. It's just not as perfectly tied up in a bow like Toy Story 3's.
Yeah, and I see seeing it that way. To me, it's tough because Woody is that guy that never quits, that never gives up on anyone. So to see him essentially abandon his family is still a bit out of character, even with the journey he takes throughout the narrative. I could almost see Woody being that guy to take one for the team and stick it out and wait for the next kid.
I think that's kind of the point of this movie, is that Woody is so self-centered in a way because he always has to be that guy. And finally his family is telling him that he is okay. They're letting him go. Like they want him to be happy. So I feel like it kind of ties back into the themes of self-acceptance in the first movie, where it's like, you know what, you don't always have to be, making the noble self-sacrificing choices. Like you've paid your due. I don't know. It feels like a more impactful ending than him staying would have been, I think.
Another thing I have is I just really don't care for bringing Bo Peep back into the fold at all. I think
Yeah, that's the interesting thing, because she was never a main character. She was a one-dimensional in the first one, and it was kind of just like a joke that Woody was in love with, like,
the sheep girl, shepherdess.
I didn't know what I should say as a term, so I was like, Bo Peep doll.
The bitch.
I thought, for her being a relatively minor character in the other movies, I thought they, brought her to life in, pretty good execution. Like she felt like a character this time, at least.
Yeah, she did, and I'm happy Annie Potts getting work, so that's a plus.
Yeah,
my
exactly.
thing with it is just once again with the third one, that one moment where they mention her and she's gone is kind of retroactively ruined in a way for me. But more importantly than like that 20 seconds of film, the likelihood that of all the antique shops, it's like Casablanca, like all the antique shops in America, and I wind up at hers, you know.
I mean, Toy Story has kind of always done that with the pop culture references, whether it's so as overt as Buzz and Zurg, I am your father, in the elevator in Toy Story 2. So
That is the one moment in Toy Story 2 where I am like, maybe they went too far in some places.
but I also thought that was hilarious when I was a little kid. So it
Same,
balances out.
exactly.
I mean, obviously the plot is very convenient, especially for the Bo Peep stuff. But it's like, are they ever gonna make like little shorts about Bo Peeps like past like several years? Probably not. Kind of begs the question, what all has she been through that makes her, polygamous, I guess.
See, that just sounds like an absolutely joyless movie. It sounds like a Lilia Forever kind of deal. It's gonna be like just like a requiem for a dream, just a slow descent, and then of course she becomes she gets on her own 2 feet. For some reason, she's now made out of a different material, and she could move her legs and all that now. And
well, hopefully, as long as she doesn't shoot up heroin and lose an arm, then I'll be fine.
yeah, that is
my
kind of
God.
the interesting thing with Toy Story in general, is that they are just inherently sad movies.
Oh, they sure are. They really know how to tug at those damn heartstrings. And, whether some movies are more excellent than others, but still do that to me. So, I mean, again, still, like we said at the beginning, probably the most impeccable animated franchise you could ever dream of. What would you let's like rank the movies. So I'm curious to hear your rankings. Like out of 10, what would you give each movie?
Oh, that's really tough. And like, okay, so how rigid are we sticking? Are we doing like you have to do a solid number? Can we go a half step?
Step if you want.
All right, I like half steps because that makes it easier. So for the first one, I'll put it this way: quote unquote objectively, I would say 10. Enjoyment, I'm gonna say this kind of sucks, but I'm gonna say 9.5, which feels really, really harsh. But some of the animation and just the datedness of it is a barrier for watching it. I won't lie.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you're judging it based on rewatchability and timelessness and stuff like that. No, that's fine. I would probably give it the same score. Find a storytelling flaw with it. But yeah, I think through this discussion, I think I have decided that 2 is my favorite of the 4. That's what I'm saying right now.
Nice. So here's the funny thing. 2, I would rank like when I think actual like quality. The first one I think is basically just a perfect movie. The second I'd actually say is a 9.5. But
Yeah.
personally, I would give it a 10.
I'll defer to that as well. Like I think I'll just give it a 10. Why not?
It's so tough because like I love the Barbie stuff. I love the, like you said, the Zurg I'm your father. There's a Matrix joke. There's a Mission Impossible joke, and it's like
Yeah.
I get how that is so almost cheap humor of its time in the way, and I'm not denying it. And a lot of it, there are still good jokes, but I see how that dates the second movie more than the first is dated by things like animation. With that said, enjoyment, I could watch that every single day of every single week.
Yeah. I agree. And before I even knew that like climbing the elevator shaft with magnets was like a Mission Impossible reference, like it was still funny to me. So I still think it still lands even if you don't get it. And these movies have a delicate balance because I try to judge animated movies based not only on their quality for me, but trying to imagine how good they would be for a kid. And obviously I remember how good I thought they were as a kid too. So judging all of my past selves perspectives, like, and just the fact that I'm thoroughly entertained by Toy Story 2 on every level at every age, I think I'll just give it a 10.
So Toy Story 3. This is a tough one. This is the one I get less certain with my rating for each movie. I'm going to say Toy Story 3. I would probably give a 9.
But I was going to say too. We're
It-
being really technical. We have to deduct some points for the meandering middle here and there. All the other elements are pretty darn good.
Yeah, I mean, if you had once again, the opening and the ending of that is better than anything in the first two movies.
Would agree.
And the middle is really good too, but there's just little things just aren't quite there for me.
Yeah, I think we were very much on the same page for the first three movies.
Which, you know, I mean, a good thing is like, okay, so sorry, I had to give you a 9 out of 10. Sorry, you're getting a 92%, not 100.
These movies, the first trilogy, still all gets like A's or A pluses. Like, calm down, honor student, Pixar, like
Yeah.
whatever.
All right, so you're 9 out of 10 for the Toy Story 3, right?
Given everything the same rating as you.
Okay, cool. So the fourth one, and I think to understand this is something I went back and forth on, is how I do out of 10. Because the last three were pretty much like right at the one extreme. For me, 5 out of 10 is just an average movie. Like, no real thoughts on it, positive or negative.
Way too, because like, you know, like a grading system is like, oh, like 60% or below is failing. Like, I don't do it that way. Like, if you get a 1 star, like, that's failing. I agree.
Yeah, and I never really give ones, at least very, very rarely. So I would say a
Same.
5 for me is average. I saw it once, and it was like elevator music.
Music out of 10.
A 6 out of 10 was like, I kind of enjoyed watching it, but I wouldn't rewatch it. A 7 would be I'd rewatch it in about 3 years. An 8 would be I'd probably rewatch it maybe, you know, once a year, once every other year. 9 and 10 are like either A, I'm going to rewatch this all the time, or B, it's so amazing and so powerful that I can only rewatch it. It's like a holiday. Christmas doesn't come every day of the year. Similar to this movie, when I watch it, that's what that day is. That's Toy Story 2 day.
What you're saying. Yeah, no, I definitely group it closer with the other movies. I think I would give it an 8 out of 10.
So for me, I would give it, I'm going to go 5.5 or 6, because I would say it's better than average for an animated movie. And I appreciate a
absolutely.
lot of things about it. But ultimately, I would never rewatch it, and it didn't connect to me on an emotional level whatsoever. And I wasn't
Yeah.
digging the humor. The new characters didn't charm me. So, you know, it's not like a straight negative, but I wouldn't say it's exactly lukewarm either.
Whereas I have already rewatched it. I've watched it twice, and I liked it both times. And it did connect with me on an emotional level. I thought it did try to say a lot of things. And I think Woody's character was really strong, and his character arc was kept intact. And there are little moments like when the doll gets her voice box, the girl she thinks she wants doesn't actually want her, even with the voice box, and then away pretty quickly to get rid of the villain. But I don't know, seeing the lost child in the fair and having the toy, like, and also scenes like where Bonnie likes Forky because of the power of imagination, and there are little moments where they feel like little vignette story ideas that they give you about the toys and how they affect childhood. So I really dug a lot of what the Toy Story 4 film was trying to say, but feels a little disconnected from the rest of the series. So I feel like an 8 out of 10 is fair for me.
Yeah, no, those are all really good points. You know, one thing for me with the fourth movie, and I'm okay with a little more adult humor in these movies. But one thing I thought was really strange and almost tasteless, to be honest, was there's a scene where there's like a dramatic moment and it kind of zooms up in Woody's face slowly, and then he says, without censorship or anything, he just says the F word. And I just felt that wasn't appropriate for a movie of this nature.
Jesus Christ, Todd. I thought you were actually like going somewhere.
No.
I thought you were going to say like, trying to get the dad thrown in jail joke went too far.
No. No, actually, I think
One of my
maybe the
favorite
best
jokes
joke
in
of the
the
movie
movie.
was the one where they did go too far. But I don't mind because the joke worked. It was the Key and Peele characters were talking about what to do with the old lady at the antique store, and they showed different scenarios where they're going to take her out. And it gets a point where like each time she gets a little bit further into her day, and eventually she goes home, she's driving home, she gets in her house, she's taking a bath, she's reading a book before bed. And she like wakes up the next morning and they jump out at her or something.
No, that's really funny to me as well. It's actually kind of funny that it has cutaway gags. Like it's Family Guy now. It's so
Yeah.
it's so weird. It actually works for me though.
It really is. Like, even when I was watching it, I was like, that joke is very much a Family Guy thing. It's very much something people might consider liberal, but like it's just done well. It's a timing joke too, because you're expecting it. So they set a pattern 2 or 3 times. So by the third time, you expect to happen. But the joke is that it doesn't happen. And the longer they go without the punchline, the funnier the joke becomes.
I think it's also funny because Toy Story just doesn't make jokes like that. So when they do make a joke like that, it's like, whoa, wait.
Yeah, exactly. And that kind of shows all of the potential with this world, with these characters, and how much mileage that you can get out of them. And it's practically endless. It's really nuts just how good of an idea that core concept is.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, honestly, some of the just base entertaining qualities of some of these movies is really good. Just like seeing a stuffed bunny and a stuffed duck, like kind of be bros and like trash talk the situation and stuff. Like I don't know, I'm a Key and Peele fan in general, but that was actually pretty funny. I did like them quite a bit.
Yeah, well, that's another thing too, is you have all these different kinds of toys. You got like the fair toys now, or the baby doll and Barbie. Then you get Ken, of course, it goes with her. Then you get the stuffed bear from Toy Story 3, or Woody and Buzz. And it's really, you could almost make, if I was going to do something with Toy Story, this is weird and it wouldn't go over well. This is why I'm not a successful creator. After the third, I would have rebooted with an entirely new cast of toys, more fit for modern audiences with what kids are playing with today. Because you could do that. You could just get different kids, different toys.
In theory, you would have fresh breeding ground for creativity with the toys, and it almost feels like Toy Story 4. That's kind of what they wanted to do, because they add like 5 new main characters. I mean, you have the stuntman bike, you have Ducky and Bunny, you have the villain, you have Forky. Like they really just added a lot of characters. So I feel like they wanted to do that in a way.
Yeah, and I mean, don't get me wrong, I get why they stick with Woody's crew, because that's ultimately what puts people in seats at this point for the series. But
Yeah.
I would in the future, I would like to see just like, even this would be so weird, but like a Toy Story series on Netflix or something, and it has none of the original characters. It's a new cast of toys entirely.
I'd watch it. It would be on Disney Plus though, but I'd watch it.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, Disney Plus now. You could get did you see the Toy Story shorts that they did between 3 and 4?
Seen them all. I will have to watch them. I think they're probably collected on Disney Plus.
Yeah, I actually got it was like a $5 DVD way back in the day. And I got it, and then there was another one released after where they fight dinosaurs or something absolutely insane, which I saw some of, and that was fine from what I saw of it. That was entertaining, but they're pretty fun. I kind of like the Toy Story shorts. I was going to be, honestly, if they just kept that up ad infinitum and just kept Toy Story as these recurring characters just in little vignettes, I think that would have worked well, and they could still do that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I'm actually kind of interested in that idea. There's a lot of movies that are like merging into TV these days. Like, I mean, Star Wars has really started to do that. So, I mean, I could imagine actually a Toy Story show, kind of similar to your pitch, actually happening someday.
And it has had a show before. It had the Buzz Lightyear show. Do you remember that?
So I do. I watched that as a kid as well.
Yeah, I remember that, and I remember it very specifically because I went to Disney World the year that it came out, and I remember watching it on the TVs at Disney World.
Yeah. No, I remember basically like a Star Wars, Star Trek knockoff for kids, but I remember liking it. It was like there was a movie and a show, I believe.
I think you're right.
It's been a long ass time since I've seen any of that.
I remember the animation does not quite hold up today, but I could say as a kid watching it who loved Toy Story, it wasn't my favorite show. I wasn't excited for it like I was some of the others, but like when it was on, I watched it and I had fun with it.
I was probably in that same camp. And now that I think about it, it was actually probably sharing more similarities with the Green Lantern because like there's a bunch of different people in Buzz Lightyear uniforms, but they're like different alien creatures and things like that.
Yeah, I forgot about that. I remember that he had like a female counterpart, but I couldn't remember any of the other characters other than, of course, Zurg.
Be Red Dude, Buzz Lightyear. Like, I don't know. I have vague images fleeting through my mind at the moment, but that's it.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing is like I've had a case of like insomnia the last few days. So I'm pretty sure at some point tonight I'll be like 5 in the morning and I'll open my laptop and I'll be like Buzz Lightyear TV show clips and I'll be watching just random moments. You're like, yes, I remember this.
Please message me those clips if you do that.
I hope that I won't get to.
just you're doomed to live in Toy Story insanity forever.
Yeah, that is a good point in a way of like, people my age have probably already gotten to do this, but we're at an age where in a few years or maybe in a decade we may have kids and we'll show them Toy Story and that's going to be an adventure. And here's my question for you. Would you show your kid all 3 Toy Stories or would you wait till they're older to show them the third?
I don't think I have the restraint to wait an extra 11 years between showing them 2 and 3. And, they would probably figure it out and find 3 by themselves anyway on their form or phone or whatever the frick. So it probably wouldn't matter anyway. But I would probably wait a bit. I would try to wait a bit at least. 1 and 2 for sure, and just in chronological order in general. But yeah, no, I do want to have kids someday, and Toy Story, those 4 movies are just films that I am really excited to show my future kids. Like, that's going to be a trip.
Definitely.
They're going to be like, Daddy, why are you crying at the cartoon? And I'm like, because it's about life and love and shit.
And that is the thing is that I think is so funny. The older I get, the more emotional I get watching movies. There's points where this is how bad I am. I'll be watching a movie in the theaters, and it won't be a sad movie. It won't be like an emotional movie, but I'm enjoying it. And I notice my eyes are watering because I'm so happy to be watching a good movie.
I don't think I've gotten to that point yet, but of movies where it's not necessarily a sad scene, and I'm just like, I'm to cry now for some reason.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. It's like I'm just so appreciative to be watching the movie. I'm so happy that this new movie that I like exists. I just get like overwhelmed emotionally.
But I feel like if you watch movies alone, you're like slightly more increased chance to cry too. So,
oh yeah, I remember seeing I remember I saw Inside Out with a bunch of people, and that was one where it was like, you watch it, and there's of course that point in the movie, and you're just like, oh yeah, I'm just chewing on some gum, just looking around the room, actually kind of bored, and then you leave, like, that was a pretty decent movie, whatever. And then you go home that night, you're in bed, and you're like, Jesus Christ.
You're like crying into your pillow, like bing bong, bing bong.
Yeah.
Well, I think we actually talked about the Toy Story movies for longer than I expected, honestly.
Yeah, I figured we probably could have stretched it out longer with each individual one, but I didn't expect to go this long. I figured I would do a solid hour or a 2.5 hour extravaganza.
But I think we should have called our podcast longer than expected.
That's really fine. It's not too late to change. We don't have that big of an audience yet.
Yeah, no one's listened yet. I think we had like 4 views on the Sonic the Hedgehog one. It's probably 2 for you, 2 for me.
That's really funny. I usually don't check it that often. I have too much anxiety. I become one of those people that I don't check the comment sections. I've really become a shut-in in that way with social media, so I don't even look at the views anymore.
Whereas I'm the opposite. It's like if somebody comments, it's like, oh my God, I have a duty to respond to said comment, whether it's positive, negative, they're asking a question or not, just to say thank you for commenting. Like I'm insane.
See, that's how I am, and I think there's 2 kinds of people in the world. Which is funny because it's so far removed from Toy Story, but you're either the person who checks your bank account every day with the app, or you never check your bank account. And I never check my bank account.
A person, so there you
go. But yeah, like I think like for me, like getting like actual harassment and actual threats and stuff like that, like I just onboarded somebody with Longshot the other day, and they talked about like certain things, and it was somebody I knew outside of publishing who was interested, that had a background in it, and they were asking me things to write about, and I had to make very clear with like how we knew each other and stuff. I said like, listen, you cannot put anything with my work, anything with my family, because people want to get rid of me. So like we got to put those walls up. And with YouTube anymore, it's like after having harassment and all that, there's a constant dread that I'm going to open up and it's going to be some absolute raving lunatic that's out for my blood.
Haven't felt like that since I was a journalist.
It's kind of a neat feeling. So
it's kind of exhilarating, but now we are totally off topic. So I guess we should end the Toy Story podcast.
Yeah, so how about, to end on a Toy Story note, who is your favorite non-Woody or Buzz character?
Okay, because I think you and I would both say Woody if we had to.
Yeah, that's just not fair.
It's not. Exclude Jesse, because I feel like that trio is kind of like the 3 main characters.
That works for me because I was really thinking Jesse.
Clay, she's so in the main cast in 2 and 3, so that almost feels unfair.
Yeah,
too.
She's really fleshed out, so it's hard not to see her as a main character.
So other than those 3, I really have always had a soft spot for Slinky.
That's a good one. I have a story about Slinky, actually. The day my mom's water broke, before my brother was born, we walked around a mall, and this mall was exciting because it was 2 stores at an escalator, and I had a Slinky toy, like one of the Slinky dog toys with a leash, and I walked the dog all across the mall, and my mom's water broke as I was doing it.
Having a fun time while she was in labor.
I was 18. No. I was 5. But
oh my God.
I'm gonna go Rex.
Anyway. Yeah, so Slinky is just, honestly, I feel like, Bullseye is always supposed to be like, oh, Bullseye is Woody's trusty steed, but like, nah, Slinky is. You shut your mouth.
Yeah, I mean, I love Bullseye and I love Slink, and of course Slinky, you got Jim Varney and that voice, and just a really fun, great character.
Yes, and he's cute, and I like dogs. and he's a good boy. So what's there not to like?
Very good points. I'm gonna go Rex. The thing is, age is like loving dinosaurs, especially when I was that age watching Toy Story. But just how naive he is, and he's good-hearted, but yet he's kind of he's a literal battering ram in Toy Story 2, and how he's always like
Rex is
freaking out and causing mayhem despite always having the best intentions.
Yeah, but he doesn't cause mayhem when he wants to look imposing. He's just doing it on accident. So that's a really good blend of a character for humor.
All right, so do you want to close it out since you opened it, or do you want me to close this out?
You go ahead, Todd. Be like Woody and give us the whole roundup.
Thank you. I'm Todd Crawford. You do that one more time. You cut out.
No, it's because I'm laughing.
Oh.
Because you so accepted the call to be Woody. You were like, okay, when I told you to do the roundup, and it just cracked me up.
I actually saluted the laptop when you said that.
Imagine you saluting, like in my head. So I'm glad we're on the same wavelength. Anyway, I'm Eric, not Woody.
And this is Too Cool for the Comic Shop.